Welcome to Brothers of the Word, because, brother, you need the Word. And as you know, I have been for the past few months on a series entitled The Plagues of Egypt. And right now we're in the middle of not just a plague that was in Egypt, but literally plagues here on the earth. If you would, go ahead, AV department, and play the video, the first video for today.
The Lord said to Moses, "Go into Pharaoh, for I have hardened his heart and the heart of his servants, that I may show these my signs among them, and that you may tell in the hearing of your son and of your son's son what things I have done to Egypt, and my signs which I have done among them, that you may know that I am the Lord." Moses and Aaron went into Pharaoh and said to him, "This is what the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, says. How long will you refuse to humble yourself before me? Let my people go, that they may serve me. Or else, if you refuse to let my people go, behold, tomorrow I will bring locusts into your country, and they shall cover the surface of the earth, so that one won't be able to see the earth. They shall eat the residue of that which has escaped, which remains to you from the hail, and shall eat every tree which grows for you out of the field. Your houses shall be filled, and the houses of all your servants, and the houses of all the Egyptians, as neither your fathers nor your fathers' fathers have seen since the day that they were on the earth to this day." He turned and went out from Pharaoh. Pharaoh's servants said to him, "How long will this man be a snare to us? Let the men go, that they may serve the Lord their God. Don't you yet know that Egypt is destroyed?" Moses and Aaron were brought again to Pharaoh, and he said to them, "Go, serve the Lord your God. But who are those who will go?" Moses said, "We will go with our young and with our old, with our sons and with our daughters, with our flocks and with our herds will we go, for we must hold a feast to the Lord." He said to them, "The Lord be with you if I let you go with your little ones. See, evil is clearly before your faces. Not so. Go now, you who are men, and serve the Lord, for that is what you desire." They were driven out from Pharaoh's presence. The Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand over the land of Egypt for the locusts, that they may come up on the land of Egypt, and eat every herb of the land, even all that the hail has left." Moses stretched out his rod over the land of Egypt, and the Lord brought an east wind on the land all that day and all night. And when it was morning, the east wind brought the locusts. The locusts went up over all the land of Egypt and rested in all the borders of Egypt. They were very grievous. Before them there were no such locusts as they, nor will there ever be again. For they covered the surface of the whole earth, so that the land was darkened, and they ate every herb of the land and all the fruit of the trees which the hail had left. There remained nothing green, either tree or herb of the field, through all the land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh called for Moses and Aaron in haste, and he said, "I have sinned against the Lord your God and against you. Now, therefore, please forgive my sin again, and pray to the Lord your God, that he may also take away from me this death." He went out from Pharaoh and prayed to the Lord. The Lord turned an exceeding strong west wind, which took up the locusts and drove them into the Red Sea. There remained not one locust in all the borders of Egypt. But the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he didn't let the children of Israel go.
Now, this is the plague of locusts, and the title of today's message is simply The Plagues of Egypt, the Other Locust. The Other Locust. What most people don't know, because our news here in America has primarily concentrated on the current viral plague that we're dealing with right now. If you watch the news, that's just about all that's on the news. It dominates the news day in, day out. All you know about is the virus that's plaguing the whole earth. But what folk don't know is that right now, and for the last few months, there has been a serious plague of locusts that's sweeping over the African continent. It's sweeping over about 8 or 9 countries right now. And the locust plague has become so bad, they're expecting a second wave of locusts to come in about another month. And they said this plague of locusts is going to be about 20 times what the current one is. So right now, the world is facing literally a plague of locusts. And it is advancing right now where the very country that we're dealing with now, the plagues of Egypt, the locusts are advancing on Egypt as we speak right now. So when God says preach about the plagues of locusts, he knew when he talked about the plagues of Egypt, there's all this stuff was coming. AV department, I want to just play the second video, and you get just a glimpse of what's going on right now across the world.
So we're fighting a coronavirus pandemic, but what about the swarms?
An enemy far more lethal than any human force.
Even in bad Hollywood movies, bugs make our skin crawl. But when they're real, and there's a COVID-19 pandemic, that's a huge problem that just got worse. And right now, the UN says swarms, some as big as a city, are eating their way through Pakistan and the Horn of Africa. So can we stop this plague of locusts? Or will the coronavirus ruin any chance of getting these swarms under control? So while we've been stuck inside because of the coronavirus, outside there's been a plague of locusts. Locusts are like grasshoppers on steroids. Under the right conditions, some of these members of the grasshopper family morph into locusts. This plague is threatening the crops and livelihoods of tens of millions of people. Kenya hasn't had it this bad in 70 years. Ethiopia and Somalia haven't seen anything like it in 25. Locusts are also in Eritrea, Uganda, and South Sudan. The threat dates back to 2018, when wet weather led to a population explosion. And with the rainy season, the UN says the number of locusts could increase by 20 times.
If you imagine that in 1 square kilometer you have 50 million individuals, then you can calculate how many there are. It are billions and billions of locusts.
And the timing is horrible. Their arrival in the Horn of Africa coincides with the main planting season.
Cleared to drop.
In South Sudan, even before the locusts invaded, 5.3 million people couldn't get enough to eat. A peace deal had raised the prospect of more farmers planting this season, but now...
This is the perfect time for the swarms to destroy all the croplands. Unless we take measures, the food insecurity situation of the next coming scenario will be the worst.
So what's behind the swarm? Why now? Well,
All right,
many people say
cut
it's
the
shifting
video
weather
now.
patterns because of global warming.
But
So
that's
we looked into it.
just a little bit of what's happening right now in a lot of the countries in Africa. And the thing about it, it's just like this virus started in another country, and the virus hopped from that country to another country to another country until it literally has infested the entire world. The locusts have the same potential, because now with travel, locusts hop aboard the other stuff. They hop aboard freight liners and ships and airplanes, and all it takes is one pregnant locust to get in your land, and before you know it, one pregnant locust, and then wet weather, and now you've got a locust plague here in the United States. And locusts have been here and plagued the U.S., just not in our lifetime. But you see, we haven't seen anything like this in our lifetime either. This stuff is not new. We just haven't seen it. There have been plagues of locusts that have hit the U.S. that have devastated the crops, just not in our lifetime. So the plague of locusts is now going through Africa, is devastating Africa, and it's taking away the food that the people have to eat. So you're going to have more people, more than likely, who will die from starvation because the locusts have eaten all of the food than people who have died from this virus. So you have to ask yourself, why? And then, not only are the Africans facing locusts, they're facing the virus. And that's one reason what's making it so difficult to even fight the locusts, because they've got the quarantines and the stay-at-home orders. So now you got, and see, that's kind of the way some of us are dealing with it. Most of us are not sick with the virus, but we're dealing with some other stuff that we're facing. It's gotten worse because of it, and it's making that stuff worse. So we're not facing sickness from the virus, but we're facing other stuff. And we got all these plagues, and we got all this stuff, and all of this stuff that's hitting us at one point. And them locusts are really, really rough. The locusts won't hurt the people. They just devour all your stuff. And sometimes when there are things that are sent against us, they don't hurt us, but they do devour all of our stuff. And the locusts are they're just rough. And God talked about in his blessings and curses in probably the most famous chapter of Deuteronomy, which is the 28th chapter of Deuteronomy. That first verse begins, "Now it shall come to pass, if you diligently obey the voice of the Lord your God, to observe carefully all his commandments, which I command you today, that the Lord your God will set you high above all nations of the earth, and all these blessings shall come upon you and overtake you, because you obey the voice of the Lord your God." This is how he begins that famous 28th chapter of Deuteronomy. And he begins talking about what's going to happen to you if you do what God says, and the blessings that will come. He said, you'll be blessed in the city. You'll be blessed in the country. Everything. You'll be blessed when you go in. You'll be blessed when you come. He goes on for the next 13 verses, from Deuteronomy 28:2 through 28:14. He goes on talking about how you're going to be blessed. Ain't that wonderful? That's just wonderful. Then it gets to Deuteronomy 28:15. When he gets to Deuteronomy 28:15, he says, "But it shall come to pass," starts out the same way, "if you do not obey the voice of the Lord your God, to observe carefully all his commandments and his statutes, which I command you today, that all these curses will come upon you and overtake you." That's Deuteronomy the 15th verse. In the 16th verse, he begins to enumerate and outline all of the curses that come. But he doesn't go on for 13 verses like he did with the blessings. He goes on for 53 verses. So the curses cover 53 verses. The blessings cover 13 verses. Almost 4 times as many curses did God enumerate as he did blessings. And you say, well, why so many curses versus blessings? Sometimes you don't need but one good blessing. Do you know that? You don't need, sometimes all you need is just one good blessing. I'm sitting out here looking at this first row. I'm looking at Minister Stephanie, which is Pastor James's wife, and all of their children. See that one wife? Sometimes you don't need but one good blessing. One good blessing can set you straight. But sometimes if you get and see, one good blessing produces a whole lot of other blessings. But one bad blessing or one bad curse produces a whole lot of other bad stuff that goes along with that. So here, God didn't have to take the time to talk about and enumerate and elaborate on all of the blessings, but he did take the time to talk about and elaborate all them curses. And even in the 38th verse, he gets to the locusts. Deuteronomy 28:38 says this, You shall carry much seed out to the field, but gather little in, for the locust shall consume it. And then he goes on, you shall plant vineyards and tend them, but you shall neither drink of the wine nor gather the grapes, for the worms shall eat them. You shall have olive trees throughout all your territory, but you shall not anoint yourself with the oil, for your olives shall drop off. You shall beget sons and daughters, but they shall not be yours, for they shall go into captivity. Locusts shall consume all your trees and the produce of your land. The alien who is among you shall rise higher and higher above you, and you shall come down lower and lower. He shall lend to you, but you shall not lend to him. He shall be the head, and you shall be the tail. This is what happens when you don't obey the voice of the Lord your God. If we just learn to listen, we will be shielded from the locusts, and our stuff won't get eaten up and devoured. And sometimes it's a negative thing to talk about, but like I said, when he told me to preach about the plagues of Egypt, there just wasn't a whole lot of good stuff. The good stuff comes in the fact that you see what happens and you don't go down that path. The good stuff comes when you watch folk who have disobeyed God and see what's happening to them. You don't disobey God. So that's the good stuff that comes out of this. So God here tells you, if you listen to me, if you follow my word, if you do what I say, all these blessings will come on you. If you don't listen to me, if you don't follow, all these curses, and one of those curses, the locust shall devour all of your stuff. But Pastor, you said the title of this message is the other locusts. What are the other locusts? Now, when you're surrounded, did you all see how the swarms of locusts work? When the swarms of locusts come, they're so heavy, they say they darken the skies. So it's so many locusts, and if you go on the internet and search on the locust plague, you see people walking, and they're just like in the middle of it's just all of these swarms of flying grasshoppers are just everywhere. And the people have gotten used to it because it doesn't even help to brush them off. Brushing off just does no good at all, because the minute you brush one off, they pile back on you again. So you just get kind of used to just walking in just a whole cloud of nothing but flying grasshoppers, nothing but locusts. Well, Pastor, what do you mean by the other locusts? Now, here when God told Moses, he says, look, they're going to eat up everything green in the land. And this is the one plague where it indicates there's not a whole lot of time between the plagues. I've talked about in some of the other messages, we don't know how much gap was between the plagues. And this one, it probably was not that long, because God says they're going to eat up everything the hail left. That was from the last sermon when all hail break loose. So here the stuff. Have you ever had a situation when stuff done messed up your stuff and you don't even have a whole lot of stuff left, and then I'm coming in and messed up that little stuff you got left? That's basically what God says. He says the stuff that the hail left, the locusts are going to come and eat that little bit up. So there would be nothing green left in the land. And this means that the livestock that were left, it means they would have nothing to eat, because they would normally eat the grass and graze. The locusts going to just clean everything out. So here the people were faced just as they are in Africa right now. Here they are faced with the potential of starvation. So you're looking all around you, and you're looking at the locusts just eating up all of your crop, all of your food, all of your groceries. You're looking at all of this stuff going to be devoured. Pastor, what do you mean by the other locust? And in the middle of all of this, what in the world can you see good in the middle of all of this? See, this is why I want to talk about the other locust. Because there's always going to be stuff wrong in the world. And you will have to have the ability to see opportunity, to see beauty, to see the blessing in the middle of sometimes what the world would consider to be disaster. So what were the other locusts? Now imagine yourself, and I know some of us can't stand bugs. You know, bugs, any kind of bug just completely freaks us totally out. So can you imagine just standing and you got in the middle of literally billions of bugs? and you're standing in the middle of these billions of bugs. You're about to starve because now all of these swarms of locusts will eat up all of your food. So how do you stand in the middle of all of this mess, all of this disaster, all of this destruction? How do you stand in the middle of that and see something good? Let me tell you about the other locusts. In John chapter 3, as it begins in that first verse, in those days, John the Baptist came preaching in the desert of Judea and saying, "Repent, for the kingdom of heaven is near." This is he who was spoken of through the prophet Isaiah, a voice of one calling in the desert, "Prepare the way for the Lord, make straight paths for him." And actually these locusts are called, they're really nicknamed desert locusts because they came out of the desert. John's clothes were made of camel's hair, and he had a leather belt around his waist. His food was locust and wild honey. His food was locust and wild honey. Now here, imagine, here, when you watch that video all the way through, all you're going to hear about are the locusts and how they're eating up the food and how the folk are going to starve. And here in this fourth verse of the third chapter of the book of John, the Bible says John, and Jesus said of John, "There's been no one as great as him to walk the earth." And here, John, out with clothing of camel's hair, a leather belt, but his food was locust and honey. And some of the real sophisticated Christians try to make it like, that was a bean, because there is a bean called a locust bean. Well, when you go back and look at the original Hebrew and the original Greek, no, that was a dried insect. That was not a bean. That was a dried insect. So we try, because sometimes, we just can't imagine, John out there eating locusts. I just can't imagine that. There are some things that we just can't even imagine that. But no, that was the real locust. That was the grasshopper locust. That was not a bean. If you go back and you study it and you look at the wording of it, that was a bug. That was an insect that John was eating. Now, it was sweet because he may have been dipping it in the honey. So he had, but this is the point. You're in the middle, even though you've got all of this disaster. That's food. But it depends upon how you look at it. You can look at it as, and see, different people will see totally opposite things in the middle of the same situation. Most of the people are going to see what the folk tell them to see. And if you're told to see this is going to destroy all of your stuff, this is going to eat up all of the crops, and it's going to take all of the food here, that's true, but it is not truth. The truth is, yes, they are going to eat all of that, because the average locust will eat his weight in food every single day. But that's not the whole truth. The whole truth is those locusts are food. And you see, not only are they food, God said that the locust was not just food, it was clean food. In Leviticus, where this is where all of the food laws are given, in Leviticus 11:22, these you may eat, the locust after its kind, the destroying locust after its kind. So he even differentiated the different kind of locusts. He said some kind of locusts are okay, some kind of locusts destroy stuff. He said you can eat it. He said the destroying locust you may eat, the cricket after its kind, and the grasshopper after its kind. So God covers 4 different kinds. He covers the regular locust, the destroying locust, the cricket, and the grasshopper. So we got no excuses. God says it's clean. But all other flying insects which have 4 feet shall be an abomination to you. In the middle of all of these locusts, billions of locusts, and God says they're clean. I want you to play video number 3. This is the way you need to think about locusts the same way Bubba Gump thought about shrimp. Play that video.
Anyway, like I was saying, shrimp is the fruit of the sea. You can barbecue it, boil it, broil it, bake it, saute it. There's shrimp kebabs, shrimp creole, shrimp gumbo, pan fried, deep fried, stir fried. There's pineapple shrimp, lemon shrimp, coconut shrimp, pepper shrimp,
cave shrimp,
shrimp stew, shrimp salad, shrimp and potatoes, shrimp burger.
cave shrimp.
That's about it.
Now, the point is, you can fix those locusts in just as many ways as Bubba could cook those shrimp. But he had to have his mind geared that this is food. Now, some of you, when you were looking at those shrimp, some of your mouths started watering. But understand this, God says shrimp is an unclean food. He says locust is a clean food. But because of the way our minds have been conditioned, we think that which God says is unclean is clean, and that which God says is clean is unclean. You notice how our minds have been switched up and changed around? Now, the locust, hardly anybody in here could think about eating a grasshopper. But if we had some fried shrimp downstairs, all the line would be wrapped around the building. See, that which God said was clean, we abhor. And that which God says is unclean is a delicacy to us. The world twists our mind. So in the middle of all of this plague that's running through Africa, God has sent the plague. Yeah, he sent the locusts, but it's food for those whose minds are open. And you can barbecue it, you can fry it, you can gumbo it, you can saute it, you can stir fry it, you can cook them locusts all kind of ways. Now, first of all, I have eaten grasshopper before. I don't know whether the brothers remember. I can't remember where we were. But they had some fried grasshopper on the menu. And I said, I have never eaten fried grasshopper before, but I'm curious to see what this grasshopper tastes like. So I ordered, and I don't think any of my other brothers ordered any grasshopper, but I ordered some grasshopper. I ordered the grasshopper, and I ate the grasshopper, and I was surprised because the grasshoppers were good. You see, our mindset changes how we perceive things. And even in the midst of plague, God has always sent salvation if you can see it, if you know his word. But if you're listening to the world, you would think these nasty things. There's no way in the... And most of the folk are going to starve to death with food swarming all around them. You need to have a Bubba mentality like that shrimp. And instead of coming out there with pesticide trying to kill them because there's just too many to kill, you need to be out there with a net. You need to be out there with a net. You figure out a way how to catch them. You open up you a stand, locust burgers, locust steak. You have locust salad. You need to have, and you have it seasoned like mad. You have it peppered up. You have garlic on. You have it fixed all. Because the folk gonna be hungry. All of the other food is going to be gone. And see, this is a mentality, and this is what separates those who go to the top versus those who stay and who are destroyed by the plague. It's often a mindset.
Would you like to try a grasshopper taco? No. Looks like you want to try it.
I don't. It's an ingredient not usually found on the menu, but one restaurant in New York is serving up grasshopper tacos to willing customers.
She's having the more difficult time.
Authentic Mexican restaurant Tolerache on Manhattan's Upper East Side has been serving up the dish to brave customers for a number of years.
We get them shipped from Mexico City, Oaxaca, and then we just saute them and then serve them a corn tortilla with a little bit of salsa verde.
Chef Fidel Rodriguez, is responsible for preparing the bug-filled dish, which only takes a few minutes to make.
The ingredients is jalapenos, onions, tomatillo, guacamole, cilantro. It's the people that see the first time, is oh my God, and I know the try tacos.
And even in the midst of this right now, even though this thing has had massive economic disasters, there's some people who done figure out how to make a fortune. They're going to come out of this thing rich as cream because they'll see the food and not the famine. And it often depends upon how you view it. So every time right now you look at a grasshopper, you need to look at that thing in a different light. They even got chocolate-covered grasshoppers and chocolate-covered. They do, and the stuff tastes good. Let me just read some of the health things about locusts. Locusts vary in protein content from about 50% to almost 60%, making them denser in protein than steak. You didn't know that. So when God says something is clean, it's good for you. Whenever God recommends something for you, it's all right. And whenever God says don't touch it, is a reason why he said not to touch it. So locust is denser in protein than steak. Locusts also contain adequate amounts of iodine, phosphorus, iron, thiamine, riboflavin, niacin, as well as traces of calcium, magnesium, and selenium. Carbohydrate levels are very low, which makes them a good candidate for Atkins and paleo types of diet. So if you want to go on the Atkins or paleo diet, get you some locusts. And this is the thing here. Some people describe cooked locusts as similar to smoky flavored bacon. You didn't know that. And if you don't have the knowledge, you'll be in the middle of a plague, surrounded by food, and you will starve to death. You will starve to death. Here, all them folk got all these swarms of locusts that God said is clean to eat, 50 to 60% protein, all these other nutrients in it. All they got to do is catch them and cook them. And actually, some cultures don't even cook them. They just eat them raw and live. I mean, it is abhorrent to our American way of thinking, but you got to admit, that's fresh. That's fresh. You got Amazon fresh, or you can literally just pick the locusts out and go, and just the leg, just a wig, and just go and swat it on down. It's fresh. Now, see, it's difficult for us to even imagine that, but a lot of cultures eat the stuff fresh, and anyone who's heavy into nutrition understands that even cooking destroys most of the live enzymes. You get all that stuff fresh, but you'd have to re-gear your mind to that. And if it ever got to that, where we had local swarms, and at least you all will have heard this message, and you'd have to say, I remember that message from Pastor Nathaniel, I'm hungry as I can be. All these locusts are flying around here, they're eating up all the food, ain't nobody looking at me. But you will live. And not only will you live, the scientific probability is you'll be healthier. You'll be healthier eating a live locust than a dead hamburger. But God said it was clean. And in the midst of all of this plague was all of this food. What food is surrounding you right now that you haven't seen, that you're looking down upon? And God has sent in the midst of your world right now provisions for you that will take you through and beyond. What have your eyes seen and recognized in the middle of this plague? It's there. We have to know his word, and we have to do. And we'll often have to put aside what the world has told us. Because often what the world has told us is exactly opposite to the truth. And in the book of Joel, 2nd chapter, beginning at the 25th verse, he talks about how even when he has sent all of this stuff, how he will redeem the people. Even in the middle of all of this. And see, this thing is right now what we're dealing with just in the U.S. And see, you all ought to be thankful that you just dealing with the virus. That you just, turn to the person, just tell them, I'm thankful I'm just dealing with the virus. See, you just dealing with, see, in Africa, they got to deal with the virus and massive swarms of locusts. So you ought to be, it's all how you view it. You ought to be thankful that you are just dealing with the virus, because one of the things that was clear from the plagues of Egypt, all of the plagues rooted out of the other plague. It started when the water was changed, and out of the water came the frogs, and then the frogs infested everything, and from the frogs came the flies, and then from the flies came the pestilence, and then from the pestilence came the boils, and then from the boils comes hail. And then from the hail comes locusts. We ought to be thankful that the only thing we're dealing with is just a virus. And that still has not affected and will not affect the vast majority of people. But you have to be able to see the food that God has sent in the midst of the thing. You know, God always had problems with people when he sent provisions. He sent all the locusts, even in the wilderness when God sent the manna. You know God had problems with folk with that manna? Just had problems with it. It just wouldn't do right. They complained about the manna. Now, the manna kept them. There was no sick among them. Nobody got sick when they ate what God told them to eat. When they ate just what God sent, nobody got sick. But they went to complaining, because I'm tired of this. I want some variety. Now, see, right now, some of you still are shut in and you can't partake of the things that you used to partake of before this virus hit. You got to be able to see the blessing in the middle of that. If you're stuck at home, there's food all around you. By the time, you could have come out with a master's degree if you'd have taken that time you were stuck at home and just used it to put forth on something positive. You could have come out, you could have worked out 3 hours a day because you're stuck at home. You could have transformed yourself while being shut in. Or you can just look at it as a famine. I'm stuck here. I can't do nothing. Yes, you can do something. It just depends on what you decide to do and what you challenge yourself to do. And if you move out of the mindset of the masses and you move into the mindset that this locust is food, if you move into the mindset that this virus thing is going to help me out a whole lot, I can make myself way better by the time I come out of this house. Most people are going to come out of the house. They're going to stay there, watch TV, eat, and sleep. So they're going to come out of the house in worse shape, mentally, spiritually, physically, and financially. But you don't have to. If your mind is in a different direction, you can come out of that house in better shape tenfold than what you went in. It's all a matter of what you can see. And here in Joel 2:25, I will repay you for the years the locust have eaten. The great locust and the young locust, the other locust and the locust swarm, my great army that I sent among you. Yeah, God sent it. You will have plenty to eat until you are full, and you will praise the name of the Lord your God, who has worked wonders for you. Never again will my people be shamed. Then you will know that I am in Israel, that I am the Lord your God, and that there is no other. Never again will my people be shamed. And afterwards I will pour out my spirit on all people. Now, this is a verse we've heard over and over and over and over, but we don't know where it comes from. We don't know it in context. And afterward, I will pour out my spirit on all people. Your sons and daughters will prophesy. Your old men will dream dreams. Your young men will see visions. Even on my servants, both men and women, I will pour out my spirit in those days. I will show wonders in the heavens and on the earth, blood and fire and billows of smoke. The sun will be turned into darkness and the moon to blood before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord. And everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. We said that verse so many, and your young men will see your old men, but we didn't realize that was right after the locusts. And that was right after God saying, I will repay you for all of the days of the locusts. Whenever God brings judgment and whenever he brings a destruction, he always brings a redemption for those who will listen and for those who will follow. And you have to simply make up your mind, will I be among the ones who will listen and among the ones who will follow? He sent food among us, people. He has sent food among us in abundance. This is some of the greatest opportunity we have ever had in our lives if we just can see the locusts as food instead of as famine. If we can see it, we can have it. If we can envision it, we can do it. And if we see it and if we do it, we'll come out of this thing. And not only will everything we have be restored, we'll be better than we've ever been before. Because whenever God sends a judgment, he always sends a redemption. And as we move into the path and into the land of redemption, there's somebody right now, and you just need to change the way you're viewing this pandemic. You can't look at CNN. You can't look at CNN and get a divine viewpoint of this. If you look at CNN, the only thing you're going to see is famine. But if you start communicating with God, he'll show you the food in the midst of the swarm. I thank you for joining us today at Brothers of the Word. You can go to brothersoftheword.com and you can send this message to a friend, or you can listen to any of the other of the series of the Plagues of Egypt. We're in a time that the world in our modern history has never seen before, but it's not new. God has brought this thing upon the earth many times, but he has always brought the redemption. He sent the Redeemer. God has always made a way for his people. And usually every time he sent this, it was because his people had simply gone away from him. And he'll have to send the plagues to tell them, come back to me. Come back to me. Come back to me. Thank you for joining us today at Brothers of the Word, because, brother, you need the Word. This is Pastor Nathaniel, and I hope that you truly enjoyed this message and that it blesses your life. If you would like to help support this ministry, we ask that you do two things. First, bow your heads for 10 seconds and ask God, Lord, what shall I give? When he answers you, go to iwanttogive.com and support this ministry. Let's bow our heads for just 10 seconds. Amen. If you heard the Lord's voice, go to iwanttogive.com. This is Pastor Nathaniel. Be blessed.